The massive research vessel Stellar Pioneer hung silently in Earth's orbit, its silver hull gleaming in the sunlight. Inside the main laboratory, lead scientist Du Young adjusted his white uniform and looked at the blue planet through the viewing window. His heart beat faster with excitement. This was his first time leading such an important mission. "Sir, the initial scans are complete," Jia said, walking up to him with a data pad in her hands. Her face showed worry as she pointed to some unusual readings. "The rainforest area is giving off strange energy patterns. I don't think our equipment is working right." Do Young smiled and shook his head. "Our technology is the best in the galaxy, Jia. It's just a primitive Class 3 planet. What could possibly interfere with our sensors?" The laboratory buzzed with activity as other scientists prepared their gear. They had studied Earth for months from orbit, watching the humans go about their simple lives. The mission was clear: get in, study the rainforest's unique plant and animal life, and get out, all without the humans knowing they were ever there. "The landing pod is ready," Taiho called from across the room. The young scientist was checking their collection equipment one last time. "We have enough power to keep our cloaking shields up for 3 Earth days." Hanul, their plant expert, walked up with an armful of sample containers. "The humidity might affect our suits," she said quietly. "Maybe we should run more tests first." "We've done all the tests we need," Du Young said firmly. He had waited too long for this chance. Their civilization had found thousands of planets, but Earth's rainforests were special. The variety of life there was unlike anything they had seen before. Jia checked the readings again. The strange energy patterns were getting stronger, but she kept quiet. Du Young was their leader, and he had never been wrong before. Still, something about those readings made her skin crawl. "All research team members report to the landing bay," the ship's computer announced. "Earth descent begins in 30 minutes. Do Young gathered his team. "Remember, we're making history today," he said proudly. "We'll be the first to study this primitive world up close. Our shields will keep us hidden, our weapons will keep us safe, and our science will unlock all of Earth's secrets." As they walked to the landing bay, Jia looked one last time at her datapad. The energy patterns now showed movement, like massive living things walking through the rainforest, but that was impossible. Their scans showed no animals that big in the area. The landing pod waited for them, sleek and silver like their ship. As they climbed aboard, Du Young felt only excitement. He didn't notice Jian's worried looks or the way the strange energy readings seemed to gather around their chosen landing spot. In the rainforest far below, a jaguar lifted its head and opened golden eyes. Something was coming. The ancient guardian stretched its powerful muscles and melted into the shadows, waiting. After all, this was its job, protecting Earth from those who thought they knew all its secrets. The Stellar Pioneer's landing pod started its descent, carrying its crew of proud scientists toward a truth they weren't ready to discover. On Earth, not everything was what it seemed to be. The landing pod cut through Earth's atmosphere like a knife through butter. Inside, Du Young watched the rainforest grow larger on their screens. Their landing spot looked perfect, a small clearing just big enough for their pod. "Engaging silent mode," Taiho said from the pilot's seat. The pod's engine switched to their quietest setting. Not even the local wildlife would hear them land. As they descended through the thick canopy, Jia frowned at her instruments. "All our sensors are acting strange," she reported. "The readings keep changing. It's like something is interfering with them." "It's just the dense plant life," Du Young said, but he wasn't as confident as before. The humidity in the air was already higher than their calculations had predicted. The pod touched down softly in the clearing. Through the windows, massive trees stretched up into the sky like green giants. Strange birds called in the distance, and unknown insects buzzed around them. "Environmental suits on," Hanul reminded everyone. They each checked their suits' seals carefully. The suits would protect them from Earth's air and keep them invisible to any watching eyes. As they stepped out of the pod, the heat hit them like a wall. Their suits' cooling systems struggled to keep up. The air was thick and wet, making everything feel heavy. "Look at these plants," Newell said excitedly, moving toward a huge flower. "They're even more amazing up close." She pulled out her scanner, but the numbers on the screen jumped around wildly. Taiho tried to map the area with his portable computer. "The trees are blocking our signals," he said with worry in his voice. "I can't get a clear reading of anything more than 50 meters away." "Split up into pairs," Du Young ordered. "Stay within communication range. We have 3 days to gather all the data we can." Jai-yun walked with Du Young, her hand near her weapon. Something felt wrong. The forest was too quiet in some places and too noisy in others. It didn't follow any of the patterns they had studied. "Sir," she whispered, pointing to a nearby tree. Deep claw marks ran up its trunk, far larger than any animal they had detected from orbit. What could have made those? Before Du Young could answer, a deep growl echoed through the trees. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. All their sensors stayed quiet. Whatever made the sound was invisible to their technology. "Just a local animal," Du Young said, but his voice shook slightly. "Remember, we're completely safe in these suits. Nothing on this primitive planet can detect us, let alone hurt us." High above them, a massive shape moved silently through the branches. Golden eyes tracked their every movement. The Jaguar's muscles rippled as it followed the strange intruders. These were not the first visitors it had dealt with, and like the others, they would soon learn the true meaning of fear. The scientists continued their work, unaware that they had already been judged. The forest had protected its secrets for millions of years. These new visitors would be no different from the rest. They would either leave, or they would disappear. Newell moved carefully through the thick undergrowth, her scanner beeping softly as she studied the local plants. Something caught her eye: deep marks in a nearby tree trunk. They looked fresh, but much too large for any animal they had seen in their orbital scans. "Control, I need someone to look at this," she called through her radio. Static answered her. The interference was getting worse. Kita arrived a few minutes later, his translation equipment hanging heavy on his belt. As a language expert, he was supposed to study any signs of intelligent life. These marks made him nervous. They seemed too regular, too purposeful. "These aren't random," he said, running his fingers over the marks. "They're organized, like territory markers, but nothing on our charts could make cuts this deep." Above them, branches moved without wind. Golden eyes watched silently as the aliens studied the warning signs. The Jaguars had left those marks on purpose, testing how the intruders would react. Back at the main camp, Du Young checked their long-range scanners again. Nothing worked properly here. The equipment showed massive energy readings that appeared and disappeared randomly. It was as if the forest itself was alive, moving around them. "Sir," Taiho called out, his voice shaking. "You need to see this." He pointed to the ground around their camp. Strange patterns glowed faintly in the soil, visible only when shadows fell just right. They looked almost like circuit boards, but that was impossible. Jai-yun studied the patterns with growing fear. "These aren't natural," she whispered. "They're too perfect, too structured. It's like someone built them into the forest floor itself." A deep growl rolled through the trees. All the local wildlife went silent at once. The aliens froze, their hands moving to their weapons. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, impossible to track. "Just a local predator," Du Young said, but he didn't believe his own words anymore. Their scans had shown no animals large enough to make such a sound. Kita's translation device suddenly sparked to life. Strange symbols flashed across its screen, patterns that matched the marks on the trees. Before he could study them, the device went dark. "Something's out there," Sun Mai said, her security training taking over. "Something smart, something that's watching us." In the growing darkness, shapes moved between the trees. The Jaguars gathered, their ancient programming activating fully for the first time in centuries. These intruders had ignored the warnings. Now they would learn why Earth's rainforests remained wild and untamed. Old Mary walked through the morning mist, his bare feet silent on the forest floor. He had lived in these forests for 60 years, and he knew when something was wrong. The birds sang different songs today. The monkeys stayed too quiet. Even the insects buzzed with warning. He stopped at a massive tree and touched its bark. Fresh claw marks ran up its side, the mark of the shadow cats. Mary's eyes widened. He hadn't seen these marks since he was a boy, when strange lights had appeared in the sky. "We must leave this area," he told the young hunters with him. They knew better than to question the old man's wisdom. The guardians are awake. Back at the alien camp, Sun Mei checked her security screens for the 100th time. Something kept setting off the motion sensors, but when she looked, nothing was there. The energy readings made no sense. They showed living things bigger than Earth's largest predators, but they appeared and disappeared like ghosts. "Control, this is security," she called through her radio. "I'm seeing some strange patterns out here." Do Young's voice crackled back, filled with static. "Just keep watching, Sun Mei. Nothing on this planet can see through our shields." Keita sat in the main tent, studying the local language patterns. His computers had picked up voices speaking in the distance, but the translation made his blood run cold. The natives spoke of ancient protectors, of cats that walked like shadows, of guardians older than time itself. "Sir," he called to Du Young, "I think we should listen to these stories. The locals are leaving the area. They know something we don't." A branch snapped nearby. Sun Mai spun around, weapon ready, but saw only trees and vines. The forest seemed to press in closer, watching, waiting. Her sensors beeped again. A massive heat signature just vanished into thin air. Jai Yun studied her data pad with growing fear. The energy patterns were forming a circle around their camp. Whatever was out there, it was smart. It was hunting them. "The equipment isn't broken," she whispered to herself. "We're the ones who don't understand." High in the trees, more golden eyes opened. The Jaguars gathered, their muscles rippling with power far beyond normal flesh and bone. These were not simple animals. They were the tip of nature's spear, the physical form of Earth's ancient defense system. The sun began to set, painting the forest in deep shadows. The aliens' camp glowed with artificial light, a beacon in the darkness. They didn't know it yet, but their technology meant nothing here. In this place, nature itself was awake and aware, and it had decided these visitors had seen enough. The Jaguars moved closer, their forms shifting between shadow and solid flesh. Soon, very soon, these invaders would learn why Earth was still wild, still free, still untouched by alien hands. The hunt was about to begin. Night fell over the rainforest like a heavy blanket. The alien camp's lights pushed back the darkness, creating a small island of artificial day. But the lights that usually made Du Young feel safe now made him feel exposed. All systems failing. Taiho's voice cracked with panic over the radio. "The motion sensors, heat detectors, everything. They're all going dark." Sun Mai ran between guard posts, her weapon ready. "Control, we've lost the security perimeter," she reported. "Something's interfering with our shields." A low growl rolled through the camp. This time, everyone heard it. It wasn't just one animal. The sound came from all directions, like they were surrounded. "Impossible," Du Young whispered, watching his equipment die one system at a time. "Our technology is too advanced for this. It has to be a malfunction." The first Jaguar appeared at the edge of their lights, but this was no ordinary cat. Its fur seemed to shift between solid and shadow, and its eyes glowed with an intelligence that froze the aliens in place. It was massive, larger than any Jaguar they had studied from orbit. "Don't move," Jai Yun warned, her voice shaking. "There's more of them." She was right. More shapes emerged from the darkness. 7, 8, 9 Jaguars, each one the size of a small car, each one moving with impossible grace. Their golden eyes held no animal fury, only cold, calculating purpose. Taiho raised his weapon and fired. The energy blast passed right through the nearest Jaguar, like it was made of smoke. The creature didn't even blink. "Run!" Sunmi shouted, but there was nowhere to go. The Jaguars had formed a perfect circle around the camp. One of them stepped forward, its massive paw leaving prints that glowed with faint blue light. Hanul stared at her scanner in horror. "These aren't animals," she gasped. "The readings, they're showing technology far more advanced than ours. But it's alive somehow." The lead Jaguar opened its mouth, but instead of a roar, it released a sound like crystal breaking. All around the camp, the aliens' equipment exploded in showers of sparks. Their invisible shields flickered and died, leaving them exposed. "Fall back to the pod," Du Yum ordered, finally understanding how wrong they had been. Earth wasn't primitive at all. They had walked into something ancient and powerful, something that had been waiting for them. The Jaguars moved as one, their forms blurring between physical and ethereal. They weren't hunting like animals. They were executing a carefully planned military operation. Each step brought them closer, herding the aliens away from their escape route. In orbit, the Stellar Pioneer received its last transmission from the surface. They aren't just animals. They're weapons. Earth is protect. Then silence fell, and the hunt truly began. Jai Yun ran through the dark forest, her breath coming in short gasps. Behind her, she heard the screams of her teammates mixing with the strange crystalline sounds the Jaguars made. Their weapons had proved useless. Energy blasts passed right through the creatures, and physical barriers melted like ice in their presence. The trees, she whispered to herself, noting how the massive plants seemed to bend away from the Jaguars' path. The whole forest is working with them. A golden-eyed shape materialized in front of her. This Jaguar was even larger than the others, its fur rippling with patterns of light that looked like circuit boards. Jai Yun froze, her scientist's mind finally understanding what she was seeing. "You're not just animals," she said softly. "You're biomachines, living weapons left here to guard Earth." The Jaguar's eyes glowed brighter, and in her mind, Jai Yun saw flashes of images. Great ships landing on Earth millions of years ago, the creation of the Guardians, the merging of technology and nature at a level her people had never imagined possible. Ki-Te's voice crackled over her radio. "Jai Yun, I've decoded part of the energy patterns. They're not just signals. They're a warning. The whole rainforest is one giant." His voice cut off in static. More Jaguars appeared, moving like liquid shadow through the trees. They weren't attacking randomly. They were herding the aliens, separating them, testing their responses. These were trained soldiers executing a perfect containment operation. From somewhere in the darkness, Du Gung screamed, "Fall back to the ship. We have to warn." His voice ended in silence. A second Jaguar joined the first, this one carrying something in its mouth, the remains of one of their unbreakable energy weapons, crushed like it was made of paper. The message was clear. Their technology meant nothing here. The ground under Jai Yun's feet hummed with energy. The trees around her glowed faintly, revealing a vast network of living circuits running through their roots. The rainforest wasn't just a collection of plants. It was a massive biological computer, and the Jaguars were its immune system. "We never stood a chance," she realized. "Earth isn't primitive. It's protected by technology so advanced it looks like nature itself." The Jaguars moved closer, their forms shifting between solid matter and pure energy. Jai Yun saw her own reflection in their golden eyes and understood their purpose. Earth was a sanctuary, a preserve, a planet where life could evolve naturally under the protection of these ancient guardians. Her last thought, before the Jaguars pounced, was a simple one. We were never the advanced ones here at all. 3 days after losing contact with the research team, the Stellar Pioneer's rescue pod found Du Yung's personal recorder half buried in the mud. The footage inside changed everything they thought they knew about Earth. The recording showed Du Young running, his breath heavy, the camera shaking with each step. "This is lead scientist Du Young." His voice trembled. "If anyone finds this, stay away from Earth. We were wrong about everything." The footage jumped to an earlier recording. Du Young stood in a clearing, pointing his camera at strange markings in the ground. The soil glowed with faint blue lines, forming patterns like computer circuits. "The rainforest is alive," his voice whispered. "Not just natural life. It's artificial. The trees, the soil, everything is connected to some vast network." And the Jaguars. The camera turned to show massive paw prints that glowed in the dark. Another jump in the footage. This time Du Young was hiding in a hollow tree. The Jaguars aren't animals. They're guardians, living weapons made of technology we can't even understand. They phase through our shields like they're not even there. The camera caught a glimpse of golden eyes in the darkness. The image zoomed in, showing impossible things. Fur that shifted like liquid metal, muscles that weren't quite solid, claws that cut through space itself. Some ancient civilization built all this. Du Young's voice shook. They turned Earth's nature into one giant defense system. The humans don't even know. They live under the protection of. The footage showed a jaguar walking straight through a solid tree. Another melted into pure energy and reformed. A third seemed to fold space around itself, moving impossible distances in single bounds. Jai-Yun was right. Du Young sobbed. Our sensors didn't fail. They just couldn't understand what they were seeing. The whole planet is protected by technology, disguised as nature itself. The last part of the recording showed Du Young's final moments. A massive jaguar stood before him, its eyes glowing with ancient intelligence. Instead of attacking, it projected images into his mind. Earth's true purpose, a sanctuary where life could grow naturally, protected by guardians that were part nature, part machine, all lethal. "We never had a chance," Du Young's voice whispered one last time. "Earth isn't primitive. Earth is." The recording ended there. In the mud next to the recorder, massive paw prints glowed with fading blue light, a final warning to those who thought they could unlock Earth's secrets. 2 months after the disappearance of the alien research team, a group of Earth scientists hiked through the Amazon rainforest. They were following strange energy readings their equipment had detected. What they found would never make it into any official report. Dr. Maria Santos led her team into a clearing that shouldn't have existed. The trees around it were bent outward, as if something had pushed them aside. In the center lay pieces of metal unlike anything they'd ever seen. "Look at this," her assistant called, holding up a twisted piece of technology. It was lightweight but stronger than steel, with odd symbols etched into its surface. Yet something had torn it apart like paper. They found more pieces scattered around. Broken machines, strange devices, and torn pieces of material that seemed to change color as they moved. But the strangest thing was the main console they found half buried in the earth. Carved into its surface was a message in perfect geometric shapes, writing that clearly wasn't human. Below it, as if drawn by a giant claw, were words in every human language. "This world is protected." High above Earth, the stellar pioneer received its final orders. Earth was now marked as forbidden territory in all galactic maps. The official reason: environmental quarantine. The unofficial reason was sealed in files that would never be opened. That night, as the scientists camped nearby to study their find, the forest came alive. The ground hummed with hidden energy. Circuits of blue light ran through the roots of ancient trees, and in the darkness, golden eyes watched and waited. A massive jaguar, its fur shimmering with impossible patterns, stepped into the clearing. Where the alien machines had lain, only smooth earth remained. Other jaguars emerged from the shadows, their forms shifting between flesh and energy. They moved like living shadows through the trees, guardians of a secret older than human civilization. The rainforest itself seemed to bend around them, hiding their passage. By morning, There would be no trace that anyone, human or alien, had ever been there. The head jaguar paused at the edge of the clearing. Its golden eyes looked up at the stars, watching for any sign of those who might think Earth was an easy target. Its fur rippled with ancient power, circuits of light pulsing beneath its skin. Deep underground, in roots older than time, Earth's true defense system hummed quietly. The Jaguars were just its surface guardians, the visible tip of protection that went down to the planet's core. Humanity would never know how many times they had been saved by these shadows in the night. The jaguar melted back into the darkness, becoming one with the forest again. Earth's secret was safe. The message had been delivered. And in the vast database of galactic civilizations, Earth's status was changed forever. Approach at your own risk. Some worlds are not meant to be explored.